What would you do if your boss told you you were already overpaid while sitting in a $2,000 chair you helped pay for? My name is Jacob Linwood. I'm 30 years old, and I've been slowly disappearing behind a cubicle wall for the last 4 years at Clearwater Insights, a mid-sized analytics consultancy based in Columbus, Ohio. We help large corporations make sense of their data, and I've been damn good at my job. Not just competent, the kind of good that made coworkers bypass protocol just to come to me for answers. The kind of good that held departments together without anyone realizing who was holding the glue. But none of that mattered the day I walked into my boss's office with trembling hands and a printed spreadsheet. I'd spent 3 hours gathering salary data from Glassdoor, Indeed, and industry reports. My voice was calm, but inside I was shaking. I hate confrontation, hate asking for more. But I was finally going to ask for what I knew I deserved, a $12,000 annual raise. Not outrageous, just enough to match what others in my role were already making. Darren Kowalski, my manager for the past 4 years, was leaning back in a Herman Miller chair that cost more than 2 of my paychecks combined. He barely glanced at the paper I handed him before chuckling. Not a polite laugh, a full dismissive snort like I just asked him for a company car. You're already overpaid for what you do here, Jacob. Something snapped in me then, quietly. Not a dramatic rage, just a gentle, internal snap, like the last thread holding together my sense of worth at this place had finally frayed. I recited what I'd practiced. Based on market data, someone with my skills and experience should be earning between $78,000 and $85,000. I'm currently at $62,000. Darren scoffed. Market rate? Jacob, we're not Google. We're a family-run firm. We don't toss money around like tech startups. Family-run firm. That phrase made my stomach twist. Clearwater was started by Darren's uncle back in the 80s. Half of upper management were blood relatives. But don't be fooled. We had clients like the Ohio Department of Health and Delta Freight Logistics. This wasn't a mom-and-pop business. It was a tight ship that ran because of people like me. I haven't had a real raise in 3 years. I pushed back. Cost of living adjustments don't count. You were promoted to senior analyst last year. That came with a 2% bump. A 2% bump. That's barely inflation. I felt my ears burn. I trained the last 3 analysts you hired. I've been covering for James every Friday. I rebuilt the client dashboard after the February crash. You cut me off. You did your job. And that was it. No gratitude. No acknowledgement. Just a cold, final period at the end of my sentence. I sat there, frozen, embarrassed, humiliated. You're 30, he added, as if that was relevant. You don't have a family. You live alone. You've got time to build your career. And suddenly it hit me. My life, my personal choices were being used against me. As if not having kids meant I deserved less. As if being single meant my work mattered less. I should have walked out, but I didn't. Not yet. He leaned in like he was doing me a favor. Let's talk again next year. Next year. Always next year. I walked back to my corner cubicle, the one next to the noisy printer and across from the break room where everyone could see my screen, and sat down without saying a word. My face was still burning, my heart pounding. I opened the Morrison account, but I couldn't concentrate. All I could hear was that voice in my head. You're already overpaid. That night, I didn't tell anyone what happened. Not my sister, who texted to ask how the raise conversation went. Not my old college roommate, who I usually call when I need a vent. I just sat in my overpriced one-bedroom apartment, the same one Darren mentioned, as if it were a character flaw, and stared at my reflection in the dark window. I started thinking about all the times I'd gone above and beyond without even being asked. The Friday nights, I stayed late when a client dashboard broke. The weekends, I worked from my laptop while everyone else posted beach photos. The times I trained new hires who later leapfrogged me in title and pay. And for what? I opened my laptop, logged into LinkedIn. I hadn't touched my profile in almost 2 years. It still said data analyst, even though I was a senior now. Not that it ever came with the recognition that title implied. I stared at the blank about me section and tried to remember what I used to say about myself before this job made me forget. It took me 3 hours to update everything. Every project, every skill, every forgotten win that no one at Clearwater ever acknowledged. I listed how I rebuilt the reporting dashboard from scratch, how I managed over $2 million in client contracts without supervision, how I trained 6 analysts who now earn more than I do. I added Python, R, SQL, Tableau. I added my master's degree from Purdue. I wrote like I was writing about someone else, someone I was finally proud of again. Then I clicked the little green Open to Work button. It was just one click, but it felt like tearing off a chain I didn't know I'd been dragging for 4 years. The next morning, I had 11 messages. 11. Recruiters, hiring managers, analytics leads from companies I'd only seen on conference panels. They were all saying the same thing. We came across your profile and we're impressed. One message stood out. Hi, Jacob. I lead recruiting at Meridian Health. We're hiring a senior data scientist, and your background in healthcare analytics is a perfect match. Are you open to a conversation? Senior data scientist, not analyst, not associate, scientist. And then came another. Hi, Jacob. I'm with Coastline Medical Systems. We're launching a major software overhaul and need someone to lead our analytics transition. Salary range is 120 to 150, depending on experience. Remote. Flexible. Are you available for a call? I blinked. $120,000. That's not a typo. That's double what I make now. I said yes. I started taking calls in my car during lunch breaks, in coffee shops after work, in a work bathroom with the fan running to muffle my voice. I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. It felt like I was living a double life. Mild-mannered Jacob by day, secret career renegade by night. And it wasn't just the money. It was the way people talked to me. With respect. With interest. Like I wasn't just another cog in the machine. Like I mattered. Each call, each interview, rebuilt a piece of me that Clearwater had chipped away. One Thursday afternoon, after a second-round interview with Coastline, I got the call. Jacob, we'd like to make you an offer. $135,000. For week's vacation. Full benefits. Remote work. We'll send the paperwork this afternoon. I pulled over into a strip mall parking lot, parked under the faded sign of an old diner, and just sat there with my head resting on the steering wheel. It was happening. It was really happening. Not revenge. Not yet. But something better. Freedom. By Friday morning, I had 3 offers lined up. 3. 1 from Coastline, 2 more in process, and several still in early conversations. It felt surreal. Just a week earlier, I had walked into Darren's office with trembling hands and a modest request. Now, I was fielding numbers I didn't even know I could ask for. Coastline was first to move. They offered $135,000, full remote, and health insurance that didn't come with a $3,000 deductible. It was the kind of package I used to think only existed for other people, the ones who networked better, who played office politics, who had mentors with influence. I wasn't one of those people. I was just the guy who stayed late and got the job done. But then came Monday. I was at home, sipping coffee from an actual ceramic mug, not the chipped office one I'd used for years, when my phone rang again. Unknown number. Familiar area code. Jacob, this is Kevin Waldrop from Hartfield Strategies. I sat up straighter. Hartfield. The name alone made my pulse quicken. They weren't just a consultancy. They were the consultancy. Global. Prestigious. Untouchable. I reviewed your background and your work samples, Kevin said smoothly. And frankly, we think you'd be a perfect fit to lead our data strategy for healthcare clients across the East Coast. It's a director-level position. Fully remote. Quarterly travel. Director. The word echoed in my mind like a song I hadn't let myself imagine. The base salary is $280,000, he continued, like he hadn't just dropped a bomb into my life. Plus performance bonuses averaging 20%, stock options, full benefits, home office stipend, the works. I didn't speak right away. I couldn't. I had to grip the edge of my desk to steady myself. Sorry, did you say 280? Yes, he confirmed. It's the top of our range, but after seeing your profile, we didn't want to lose you to another offer. Another offer. As if I were the kind of candidate who regularly had offers on the table. As if I were the one companies competed for. Not the one who got passed over for title changes and $1,000 raises. I'd love to learn more. I finally managed. We scheduled the next call. I hung up, then leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. My chest was tight, but not with fear. was something sharper, something hotter. It was clarity. I'd spent 4 years being told, subtly and not so subtly, that I wasn't quite enough, that I was lucky to be where I was. That wanting more meant I was ungrateful. But here I was, receiving offers that more than quadrupled my salary. Not because I had suddenly become more talented, but because I had finally stopped accepting less. Tuesday, I got the formal offer from Coastline in my inbox. Wednesday, Hartfield followed. I printed both letters and laid them side by side on my desk. $135,000. $280,000. Both with benefits. Both with opportunity. Both with something Clearwater never gave me. Respect. And yet, there was this quiet fear humming in my chest. Not fear of the new roles, but fear that somehow this was a fluke. That one of them would call and say, "Sorry, wrong Jacob. We meant to send that to someone else." That's what 4 years at Clearwater did to me. It didn't just underpay me. It untrained me to believe in myself. But not anymore. The next day, I rehearsed my resignation in front of the mirror. "Dear Darren, I'm resigning effective delete." This letter serves as formal notice delete. Nothing felt right. Because the truth is, I didn't want to just quit. I wanted him to understand. To see the damage he'd done. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted acknowledgement. I wanted the person who laughed in my face to realize what he'd thrown away. On Monday, I walked into the office early, printed my final resignation letter, and waited. At 8:50 a.m., I knocked on Darren's door. "Hey, Darren. Got a minute?" He didn't even look up from his laptop. Sure. Come in." I handed him the letter. "I'm giving my 2 weeks' notice." He looked up then. Really looked. And I watched the shift in his face, from irritation to surprise to disbelief. It was a beautiful thing. "Wait, you're serious?" "Completely." "What happened?" I didn't flinch. "I found a role that compensates me appropriately. One that values what I bring to the table." He leaned back, calculating. "We could revisit your salary." But I just shook my head. I'm done negotiating with people who only see my worth when I'm walking out the door. And that was the first moment I knew, really knew, I was never going back. I expected Darren to take the news with thinly veiled irritation, maybe even some condescension, a pat on the head before he washed his hands of me. But that wasn't what happened. What happened was far more satisfying. Because in that moment, that split second after I told him I was leaving, I watched the color drain from his face. It wasn't rage. It was fear. Not the kind that gets loud and messy. No, Darren's fear was quiet, calculating. The kind of fear that only surfaces when someone realizes they've misjudged the weight of a pillar, and the whole building might come down because of it. He leaned forward slowly, folding his hands like he was preparing for a negotiation. "Jacob," he said, drawing out my name like he was trying to remember how to be sincere. "I'm not going to pretend this isn't a surprise. But if it's about the raise, I think we can revisit that. Maybe not the full $12,000, but let's talk. Let's figure something out." I didn't answer right away. I wanted him to feel the silence. Let it stretch long enough to sting. "This isn't about $12,000, Darren. That number was a test. One you failed." He sat back like he'd been slapped. I continued, my voice low even. "It's about the way you laughed when I brought it up. About how you made my personal life part of your calculation. About how you only seem to recognize my value now that I'm no longer here to prop up your department." He tried to recover. "Well, what kind of offer are we talking about? Let's be honest here. Maybe we're not that far apart." I looked him straight in the eye. "We are." "How far?" he asked, eyebrows raised, the illusion of control slipping. I could have told him. Could have said $280,000 just to watch him swallow it. But I didn't. Not because I was being coy, but because I'd outgrown the need to make him understand. The value was never his to determine. Instead, I said, "Far enough that this conversation isn't necessary." His expression twisted. He wasn't used to this version of me. The Jacob who didn't wait for approval. The Jacob who didn't shrink in the face of authority. He tried one more tactic, the oldest one in the book. "You sign a non-compete." "No," I said calmly. "I didn't. There's nothing in my contract that prevents me from accepting this new role." I checked. I hadn't. Not really. But I knew Darren hadn't either. He was bluffing, and I had more cards in my hand than he did. A beat of silence. Then another pivot. What if we bump your salary to $75,000? Fast track a promotion to lead analyst. Private office. Small team. I'll run it by my uncle today. 2 weeks ago, that offer would have made my whole year. It would have felt like everything I'd worked for had finally paid off. But now it just sounded cheap. Appreciate it, I said. But I've already given my verbal commitment elsewhere. He leaned forward, desperate. Verbal's not binding. What if we push it to 80? That's a 30% increase from where you are now. Come on, Jacob. That's serious money. I didn't even blink. It's still less than every offer I've received. I watched his face twitch. He was spiraling, not because I was leaving, but because he finally understood what that meant. Who would train the new hires? Who would manage the client dashboards? Who would fix the reports when they broke at 11 p.m.? Who would cover for James again and again without complaining? I could see it dawning on him, not all at once, but in slow, painful waves. You're making a mistake, he said finally. New jobs are risky. You don't know the culture, the expectations. There's security here. You're part of the team. I smiled, not to be smug, just because I'd never felt so clear-headed in my life. The team didn't think I was worth a conversation until I was halfway out the door. He opened his mouth, then closed it. I stood up. My last day will be Friday the 25th. He didn't try to stop me. He just sat there, quiet, slumped, staring at the resignation letter like it was written in a language he didn't speak. And for the first time since I joined Clearwater, I walked out of his office without carrying the weight of needing his approval. No fear, no guilt, just clarity and power. Friday arrived with strange stillness. I came in early, as usual. No fanfare, no announcement. Just me, my desk, and 4 years' worth of memories folded neatly in a habit. I brought a small cardboard box with me, the kind they use for paper reams in the supply closet. That's all I needed. My things weren't many. A potted succulent I'd nursed through 2 Ohio winters, a photo of my dad and I at my graduate ceremony, a ceramic mug that said Data Nerd in faded blue letters, a stapler I bought myself because the office ones always jammed. The rest? The rest belonged to Clearwater. The morning dragged, not because there was much left to do, but because every moment felt like it might be my last one as the person I used to be. I spent hours documenting handoff notes, organizing project folders, and sending goodbye emails that were short and polite, never emotional. People started to find out. Whispers traveled faster than I did. First it was Sarah from accounts, who cornered me by the coffee machine. "Wait, you're really leaving?" she whispered like it was a scandal. "Yes." "Where to?" "Out east. Remote." I nodded. She leaned in. "Is the pay good?" I looked her in the eye. "It's fair." She smiled awkwardly, but I could see it, the calculation in her mind. Wondering how underpaid she must be if I got something better. Wondering how many years she'd been settling. By noon, James had stopped by. "You serious, man? Thought you were lifer material." I didn't even know what that meant anymore. Then, around 2 p.m., Darren appeared at my cubicle. He hadn't said much since our last conversation, but this time he lingered, his expression unreadable. "Jacob," he said, motioning for me to follow. "Can we talk?" I followed him down the hallway to his office, the one with the overpriced chair and the glass walls he always pretended offered transparency. He closed the door behind us. "I've been thinking," he started, "about our last conversation, about what you said." I said nothing. He sat down, his tone more measured than before. I spoke to my uncle. "We're prepared to go to $75,000. Immediate promotion to lead analyst. Your own team. Private office. $75,000. The number landed like a joke in the middle of a eulogy. It was exactly $1,000 more than what I had originally asked for. 2 months ago, that offer would have made me feel seen. It would have been validation, a step forward. Now it felt like an insult delivered in polite wrapping paper. "I appreciate the offer," I said, "but I've already accepted the other position." His face tightened. "You signed a contract?" Gave him my word. He sat back, trying again. "What if we match it?" I shook my head. 80. Still no. It wasn't about the money anymore, though it absolutely was too. It was about the fact that they only saw my value when I made myself scarce. Darren leaned forward, voice lower. "Seriously, Jacob, What can I do to change your mind? And that was it. That was the moment. The moment I realized I had flipped the power dynamic entirely. Not out of spite, not to make a point, but because I finally knew in my bones what I was worth. I stood up, not hurried, not dramatic, just steady. There's nothing you can do. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was just real. He looked at me like I'd walked out of a dream he didn't know he'd been having, and taken the whole foundation with me. By 5 o'clock, I was packing my last item, a sticky note with a Python function I'd scribbled in a rush one morning, and sliding it into the box. Darren stood by the door, watching. You sure about this, Jacob? I've never been more sure of anything. If the new job doesn't work out, I'll find another. I always will. He nodded, not because he agreed, but because he didn't have anything left to say. I walked out at 5:47 p.m. on a cold Friday, holding a box that weighed less than 5 pounds and carried 4 years of my life. And for the first time in those 4 years, I wasn't carrying anyone else's expectations with me, just mine. I walked to my car, put the box in the passenger seat, and drove away, not from a job, but from a version of myself that I had finally outgrown. No fireworks, no grand speeches, just the quiet triumph of knowing that I had chosen myself. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. 3 weeks after I walked out of Clearwater Insights for the last time, I was sitting in my home office with a fresh mug of coffee, reviewing a strategy deck for a new healthcare client based in New York. Morning light poured through the window, catching the edge of my laptop, the one my new company had shipped to me overnight, along with a $2,000 home office stipend and a welcome box that included company swag and a handwritten card from the CEO. Everything felt new, earned, and then my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but the area code was one I knew too well. I answered, and there it was, the voice I'd heard in my head for years, but never with this particular tone. Jacob, it's Darren. He told me he got my number from HR and jumped right in. We're having some trouble with the Morrison dashboard. The client updated their reporting requirements, and honestly, no one here really understands the system you built. I listened without saying a word. He mentioned Sarah had been trying to figure out, but in his words, she was struggling. I remembered Sarah, struggled with pivot tables, let alone a multi-layered visualization system I coded from scratch. Darren went on. Your notes are great, really, but there are some client-specific configurations that aren't in the documentation. We're kind of stuck. I was wondering if you might be available for a few hours of consulting. We pay your rate, of course. I let his words hang there, feeling the shift in gravity. The same man who told me I was overpaid now needed my help. The same man who laughed when I asked for a $12,000 raise was now offering to pay me whatever I asked. I could have charged him 4 times my old hourly rate. I could have let the moment stretch into poetic justice. But I didn't need justice. I had peace. I told him I'd check my schedule and get back to him. After I hung up, I sat there for a long time, not debating whether I should help, but just letting the reality of it all settle into my bones. I had nothing left to prove. I wasn't angry. I wasn't vengeful. I was simply done. That evening, I texted him, after reviewing my current commitments, I won't be able to take on additional consulting work at this time. Best of luck with the presentation. He called twice after that. I didn't answer. 6 months later, I got a LinkedIn message from Jennifer in HR. Hi, Jacob. Hope you're doing well in your new role. We're hiring for a senior data scientist position, and I immediately thought of you. Would you be interested in discussing an opportunity to return to the Clearwater family? I read it once, then closed the app. No response. No anger, just silence, the kind that says everything without needing to explain a thing. They had their chance. They wasted it. And I chose myself. And that changed everything. Here's what they don't tell you about walking away. It's not the dramatic slam of a door or the cinematic moment where you leave people speechless. It's quieter than that. It's a breath, a silence, a line you cross where you never go back. I didn't leave Clearwater because I hated them. I didn't walk away to prove a point. I left because I had finally come to a simple, unshakable truth. I was never going to be seen fully in a place that only noticed my value when I threatened to leave. And once I knew that, I couldn't unknow it. I think about how long I stayed. 4 years of loyalty, reliability, late nights, patch systems, trained analysts, and emails answered at midnight. And for most of that time, I thought I was lucky to be there. I thought wanting more made me difficult. I thought gratitude was supposed to mean silence. But gratitude isn't silence. It's not submission. Real gratitude is knowing your worth and still showing up. Not because they underpay you, but because you over-deliver anyway. I did that. I gave them the best of me. And when I asked for a fraction more, they laughed. That laugh was the sound of my freedom. Because when someone laughs at your worth, it becomes the clearest signal you'll ever get that it's time to go. Today, I work in a place that values me before I ask. A place where my ideas are invited into meetings, not dismissed before they leave my mouth. A place where compensation is aligned with contribution, and respect is the baseline, not a reward. But the real transformation didn't happen in my paycheck. It happened in my spine, the way I sit taller now. In my voice, the way it doesn't shake when I say what I need. In my choices, the way I no longer ask, is it too much to want this? But instead ask, is this enough for who I am now? And sometimes, late at night, I remember that moment in Darren's office. How he offered me exactly $1,000 more than I'd once begged for, like it was a gift instead of a long overdue apology. I remember his voice when he asked, "What can I do to change your mind?" And how the most powerful thing I ever said was simply nothing, not out of bitterness, not to hurt him, but because there was no part of me left behind that still needed his validation. The company I left, they hired 3 people to replace me. 3. And last I heard, they're still struggling to stabilize the very systems I built. Darren got promoted. Regional director. Makes sense, really. That's how it works in places like that. Appearances over substance, politics over performance. His region's been underperforming for months. And me? I wake up every day to a job that sees me, a team that trusts me, a salary that doesn't make me second-guess my groceries. But most importantly, I wake up knowing I didn't wait for permission to become the version of myself I always was: capable, valuable, whole. So no, this isn't a story about revenge. This isn't about making someone pay. It's about finally refusing to pay the price for staying small. It's about knowing, not hoping, not wishing, but knowing that you are worth more than how you've been treated. And when that knowing settles deep enough, it changes everything. How you walk into rooms, how you say no, how you love yourself enough to leave what no longer honors you. That's the real win. Not the job, not the paycheck, but the day you no longer need someone else to validate the truth you already knew: you are always worth more. If you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or told to just be grateful, I want to hear your story. Drop a comment below and tell me, when did you finally choose yourself? And if this story gave you strength, even just a little, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that remind you, you are more than enough. Always have been.